So that also brings me to the wall. I don't understand how something that was paid for by the American taxpayers and appropriated through Congress could be demolished without a good reason. So the southern border wall is a bipartisan project that has been funded by numerous Congresses over the decades. It has always been bipartisan until just recently. And so to have new border wall that was approved and funded, Nancy Pelosi actually signed on to the last border wall funding measure because it was a part of a deal that she and the congressional members made with the president, horse trading. And that's where funds for the wall came from. There's not a lot of new wall that's been built. It was mostly replacement wall with just 32 miles of new wall. So how would Joe Biden justify tearing down brand new wall that was paid for by U.S. taxpayers?
The legal justification is going to be very difficult. Senator Josh Hawley in the DHS nominee's confirmation hearing yesterday pressed Alejandro Mayorkas, the nominee, on this issue. And Mr. Mayorkas did not have a good answer because he knows he's on shaky legal ground when it comes to Congress, through legislation, appropriating money for a project and it just being declined. It invokes all sorts of appropriations laws, so it's going to get hairy really fast. Biden did do something today, the executive order, where he ended the national emergency on the southern border. So that takes away some of the legal authorities used for wall construction. So that makes his case a little bit easier. But as to the question of already appropriated money, it's going to get tied up. But at the end of the day, we've seen how the left treats immigration and border security policies. They chose in the Obama administration just not to enforce the law and really expanded this idea of prosecutorial discretion, whereby they just wouldn't have ICE deport people. They would tell ICE to stand down. They're going to do the same thing on the border. And believe it or not, it actually costs a good amount of money to stop construction. It's not a costless thing. These funds and contractors are already set up and going. You can't just shut it down with the wave of a magic wand. And then you get to the next question. They've contemplated the idea of tearing down existing wall. Now, there's no policy justification for that whatsoever besides just a hatred of President Trump. And so if they try to do that, I expect this is going to get really hairy really fast. And you got to couple that with the fact we're going to see a massive surge on the border. People are already coming, and they're chanting Biden, Biden, Biden. So I don't know how you tear down a wall, stop building a wall when people are just coming across in big numbers.
So will there be the possibility of private citizens who live near the border suing because he's ended the national emergency just when we are about to experience an actual resurgence of the national emergency? Because the three things that you've shared with us that he did, ending the Remain in Mexico policy, ending the national emergency, and using, the combination of no more new wall and seeking to tear down wall, if you just look at those three things, those will basically reignite the surge that was going on when President Trump took office. And it was such a mess. It was not just children in cages, but there's a lot of sex trafficking that goes on at the border because the cartels tell the parents they're bringing the kids here and they pay the $9,000. The cartel brings the child into America, but instead of giving them to a relative, they traffic them. And it creates all kinds of other problems. There's a rise in kidnappings, rapes, assaults, armed robberies, murders. And then there's just the sheer number of people. I remember stories from just after the president won the election and into his first term after he was inaugurated, where the people in Arizona were saying there's just hordes of people wandering around, people who've come into the country illegally, and they're just wandering around on the streets. It's just extra bodies everywhere. And these are people who you can't just say move along, like they're there. They don't have anywhere to go. What is going to be the conversation surrounding that from the Biden administration when they've ended the Remain in Mexico policy, no more wall, no more emergency, tear down some of the wall? How is this going to work for actual Americans?
Right. So, luckily we war gamed this out along with the Texas Public Policy Foundation down there in Texas, obviously. And we kind of thought through, and everyone was assigned a role of, Texas governor, President Biden, DHS, et cetera, the courts, and kind of got to the point in the decision-making process. What does Texas do when DHS is basically told to stand down and people are flooding across the border into Texas? And I think there's a legitimate possibility you're going to get into some really hairy constitutional tests Like, Texas has a National Guard. They have private citizens with land, right on the border. People aren't just going to sit there and let folks just storm across. And the impact on Texas is going to be huge in other border states. So it's really inviting a crisis of the worst magnitude, both for our security but also our constitutional government. We elected Congress to pass laws that, declares wants a secure border and an orderly immigration system. You can't just have the federal government come in on day one and say, we're tossing all that aside. Joe Biden's telling ICE to stand down most removals for 100 days. So he's basically telling the chief immigration law enforcement agency, don't do your job. The green light is on. It's flashing, come in. And it's going to result in real chaos. And I don't think it's going to play out well when they're trying to push a massive amnesty bill on Capitol Hill. I don't think there's a good argument for massive amnesty and more open borders while we're seeing a huge historical rush coming across the southern border.
Thanks for watching the Heritage Foundation's YouTube channel. With more than 500,000 members, we are the nation's largest conservative research and education institution. We believe the principles and ideas of the American founding are worth conserving and renewing. Please help us further our mission by subscribing to this channel and sharing our videos with your family and friends.